Greetings, fellow Earthlings. This is Dave with the podcast And Another Thing with Dave. Thanks for tuning in. I'd like to give a shout out to our listeners from out the world. We've got people in the UK, Canada, Romania, Australia, Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, and many more countries. 49 countries listening. Thank you very much. This is going to be a multi-part series on conspiracy theories featuring Cutting Up, Paul, Ascension T, and Professor Moneypenny from the Stereo app. Stay tuned as we get into it.
But back to what you were saying, Moneypenny, I think it's a quality of life. Driving isn't a great quality of life. It hurts your back. If you're a long haul trucker, you're not seeing your family grow up. I think people got paid half their salary to stay at home, and they're like, you know what? I'll take a job with 75% of the pay if I can have more quality of life.
Yeah, but a lot of these
What do you guys
truckers,
that's
think?
one of my biggest theories. I
a
do
lot of
believe that.
these over the road truckers make six figures, man.
Mm-hmm.
They make
Yeah, now
80,
in the
90,
UK, it's
$100,000 with a high school
78
diploma.
grand
That's a
is
lot of
the
money.
salary for most truckers. So that's about 100,000 US dollars.
Right.
So there
But
you
Paul,
go. That's pretty
but
close.
if you bought your house already and you got a baby,
Yeah.
maybe you made the decision, I'll take a job, make 75% of what I was making, but I get to spend time with my family. What do you think?
Well, I think that there's another argument on top of the layers of arguments that I've heard, from the Brexit to the restroom to the needles to the Texas thing and the salary and the family. I got another one to add to it, and that is the stimulus
Lord.
packages are preventing the recovery. They prevented
Well,
suffering, but then they're preventing the recovery. Our governor shut us off from the recovery monies early, 3, 4, 5, 6 months early, because the employers were
wow.
complaining that nobody wants to go to work because they can stay home.
Right. Well, I think that's what
So
Miss Moneypenny was saying, and that I agree with.
Yeah. And they've got the
I,
gig economy. You see, now in the UK, you can work for a Deliveroo or an Amazon or whatever. You don't have to be vaccinated. You get a solid hourly pay. You can work the hours you want, whenever you want. You just
wait a minute,
log on to a gig app on your phone. You go out to work when you need it.
what does
Yeah.
gig mean? GI? Are you saying
I and I
GIG,
used
Penny?
to do
Yeah,
that. I
gig,
used to work for Uber and
GIG.
Lyft. I used to work for Uber and Lyft until the pandemic hit, but I'm the opposite end of that. Like, I
Oh,
was like, oh my God, I was really scared because Uber and Lyft will not tell you if the patient, because they know where the people come from. They track everything. So they know if the person just came from China, but they won't tell you. They just want their money. Right. So, like, oh God. So that's when I quit. I'm like,
So in the UK, you have an app and you can just say, right, I'm available for work. And it'll go bing, 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 search on where you are, your location, and say, how many hours do you want? What rate of pay? And it'll give you a choice of 5 gig employers to go and work for immediately within 10, 15 minutes.
same here. Whether you do construction, driving, you name it, package delivery, person delivery, or even construction. There's a company called Handy here. So if you do construction, you can sign up. What kind of jobs do you want? We'll only take 25% of your money. Right?
But it is weird because I don't know about you,
It's
we have
weird.
got adverts in every window of every retail business looking for staff. They just are short staffed for everything. We've got
Same
food
here.
rotting in all the farmers' fields because we've got nobody to pick the vegetables. They're rotting. We've got abattoirs where they are so crammed with pigs ready for slaughter that they've actually had to slaughter pigs themselves and not process them for the food chain because they don't have the staff to do that.
I think maybe
oh
it's the perfect
man.
storm. Is this the end of royalty as we know it? Is this the end of us tolerating what we call billionaires and royalty? Like, why do we
I,
tolerate
I
that?
I think that mixing billionaires with royalty is a disservice to billionaires.
No,
Or a
we're talking
disservice?
food
So there you go.
shortages. We've got our gas stations were short for weeks where you couldn't leave your house because you couldn't get any petrol to put in your tank, in your car or your van. We had food shortages are still ongoing where you can't get much fresh vegetable and produce at all at the moment. One, because it's if it's domestic and it's grown here, there's nobody to pick it. It's rotting literally in fields all around the place. And you've got no truck drivers to bring in the imports that come in from Europe and further afield.
Even though the crops are rotting in the fields, they won't send out a notice, hey, come get some free food, because that goes against quote unquote capitalism, right? To
No,
Well,
give
the
it
actually,
away.
it's to
They'd
do
liability.
with
rather
legal
No, the
insurance. It's to do
liability.
with insurance of allowing
Yes.
somebody on your property if they break a leg or fall over, and there's a liability for the farmer or the
Well,
landowner.
and not to
right.
mention, it's
So
not made for walking on. There's snake. You know, there's
so
snakes and animals out there, right?
but you see my point, the irony, right? There's
Yeah,
people
yeah,
hungry
it's
and
very
we're gonna let
ironic. Yeah,
acres and acres of food go fallow. Like, wow, this is
well,
crazy. Like
it's
what
horrible. People are
we're in an
starving, and there's yeah, food everywhere.
unprecedented time right now. And this gets me back to regenerative farming and how we got to look more local. Like we can each do container gardening. Like even if
Yeah.
you only have a
Meanwhile, back in the
patio.
leper colony, people are starving and pooping all over the freaking sidewalk.
Right, right.
That's what we have going on, guys.
Yeah, but our
Wow.
farmers are saying they can't get the chemicals that they would normally use when they're protecting crops, and looking after crops and doing washing and hygiene stuff. They can't physically get the chemicals to do that, and they can't get the actual feed that cattle normally feed on. If they're not a grass cattle, if they actually have a feed, they cannot get the feed. So the cattle are actually starving.
So you mentioned
Okay,
two
so
great points. You mentioned two great points. Cattle should only feed on grass. Everything else is artificial, and it makes for higher cholesterol in the meat. Grass-fed beef, they charge more for in the store. It's like a luxury now. It only
yeah, yeah,
used
yeah.
to be grass-fed beef. So we got to go back to that. We can't be growing crops when the world is like, we're running out of real estate, we're running out of resources, we're running out of water, especially. We can't be spending a bunch of water growing corn to just feed it to cattle when we could just grow the cattle in different places where it rains more, where there's grass. It's insanity. So,
Okay, I got an
but
answer. How about we just make all the blacks hate all the whites, all the women hate all the men, all the rich hate all the poor, and let them cull each other to death, and then we
well,
can eat what's
and
left.
well, who do you want to marry? Let's argue about that because like we should even
There's no
care, right?
point
Like if
getting
some
married
if
those days because we can't reproduce anymore. We've got our reproduction hormones have gone because of vaccines and
Yeah,
viruses. Right, but you see my point, right? Like it's bad that somebody loves somebody, right? Like I'd rather somebody hated somebody that loves somebody. Like if you want to marry somebody, knock yourself out as long as they're a consenting adult. I don't care. How does it affect my life? Not at all. As a matter of fact, if you marry another man, then you're one less competitor in the gene pool for me looking from a woman. So that's a benefit. So why would anybody be
well,
anti-gay?
but
It's
there's
insanity.
also a benefit if you lock everybody up else up who is your competitor.
Well,
There's
there
no
you
room
go.
in
There's
the
ways to
jails.
get rid
That's
of
a
your
good point,
competitors.
Paul. There's no room in our
That's why
jails.
and guess what? We made jails for profit. They're full and they're making products for profit companies. Like most we talked about this real briefly before you got here, Miss Moneypenny, but I don't know what they do in the UK. But in the US, prisoners can volunteer to work, but you either sit alone in your cell all day or you volunteer to
Yeah,
work. What would you
Oh,
do?
no, they do
So,
work. Most prisoners do work, but they make road signs and things for nationalized companies like the government
oh,
owns.
oh, okay,
no, 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 not here, brother.
Here, here they make Levi's jeans, they make Nikes, they make allspice, deodorant, they make toothbrushes, toothpaste,
So
License
private
plates.
companies pay, do they?
license plates,
And
two
private
dollars an
companies
hour.
fund it.
We don't know. They don't tell us what they pay them. We don't know, but we know it's dirty.
Two
And
dollars an
and
hour at
there
most.
was I
Way
live
under
in the
minimum
biggest
wage.
county in
Well,
Texas,
it's the same as a
Harris
Chinese
County.
child, I suppose.
I
Right.
live in the
It's a sick.
largest county in the state,
Thank you.
Harris County, Houston, Texas, right? And they did a study years ago that indicated that more than 70% of all the people housed in Harris County Jail